The supply chain faces a lot of challenges right now. There's geopolitical unpredictability, there's tariff uncertainty, there's the end of de minimis exemptions. The Red Sea is still a mess, and we've got constantly changing regulations worldwide. The supply chain does not need one more problem, but it has one anyway, and that's cargo theft. Here are a few statistics just to give you a sense of the enormity of this issue. According to Senator Deb Fisher, since 2021, there has been a 1,500% increase in cargo theft in the United States. When you see 1,500%, that looks weird. It's the kind of number that would typically make me check my math. It estimates that this is costing the industry as much as $35 billion a year. As reported by the Transportation Intermediaries Association, cargo theft grew by more than 600% between November of 2022 and March of 2023 alone. That's 600% in less than 6 months. Now, in terms of truck freight specifically, recent estimates suggest that 2,500 truckloads are stolen a year. That's an average of 200 per month and about 7 a day, nearly hourly between 9 and 5. So who pays for all of that theft? Companies shipping goods, companies transporting goods, you and me, the consumers. So in this week's episode of Art of Supply, I will take you through this cargo crime epidemic, from the different types of theft that are being seen to more details about just how widespread this problem is. We'll talk about the role that technology is playing on both sides of this issue, making it easier on the one hand for criminals to seize loads, and making it easier for shippers to safeguard their cargo on the other hand. And finally, we'll dig into one of the worst and fastest growing areas of cargo theft, copper, as a sort of case example. Now, it's bad enough that cargo theft is a big problem, but it is also a growing problem. Cargo theft surged in the second quarter of 2025, and it's up 13% over the same quarter last year. It also grew by 10%, just going from Q1 to Q2 of 2025. In addition to being more frequent, each theft incident is also getting more expensive. Last year, the estimated average value per theft was over $200,000. This situation is truly getting out of hand, which means it's not hyperbole when organizations like FreightWaves describe it as being under siege and talking about it as a relentless wave of criminal activity that threatens the very stability and safety of the trucking industry. Now, these thefts, coming in somewhere between $15 and $35 billion a year, are broken down by thousands of individual incidents. But where does it happen, and when is it mostly taking place? Trailer burglaries and full trailer theft have been recorded at elevated levels in some of the major metropolitan areas, including LA, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Atlanta, Georgia, and New York City. California, Texas, and Illinois are the 3 most targeted states. Just those 3 states accounted for about 46% of all reported thefts last year. And California alone is somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% of what the 3 states at the very top of that list are associated with. Not only does this indicate that the West Coast is vulnerable, it also shows what a major part in all this major ports play. Now, when we think about when these thefts are taking place, CargoNet did an analysis of theft incidents by the day of the week, and they see what they describe as a V issue. So they have a lot of theft early in the week. It dips midweek, hump day. People are staying home. And then it's followed by a surge on Fridays. In fact, Fridays account for over 20% of all incidents. The reality is, stolen trailers are more likely to go unnoticed until Monday morning, and that gives the criminals a head start. At the same time, on Fridays, carriers are rushing to arrange shipments before the weekend, which makes them more vulnerable to deception when they're trying to hurry and match carriers with loads before business closes. The other thing that's a concern, long weekends. So, with Labor Day this coming Monday in the United States, everyone had better make sure those yards and trailers are secure. Like all other things, cargo theft is benefiting, I guess you could say, from the impact of digital transformation. Digital load boards make it easier for shippers and carriers to connect, but they also make it easier for the bad guys to strategically intercept valuable merchandise. So we have sort of this range of types of theft. Traditional cargo, the good old days, would see criminals breaking into trucks or stealing trailers at truck stops, in parking lots, parked on the side of the road. Anytime cargo is left unattended, it can potentially be stolen. Slightly less dramatic is pilferage. That's where you have criminals altering a bill of lading and maybe skimming a little bit off the top just to hold on to for themselves. From those two, we start to get into the more complex and sophisticated forms of theft. Strategic cargo theft and fictitious pickups involve the use of fraud to trick shippers. They're getting shippers, brokers, and carriers to literally hand over loads to thieves instead of legitimate carriers because they can't be sure of the difference. There are even some examples of cyber cargo theft where bad guys are using phishing emails to get access to a company's systems and pull the data out about their loads. Then they can use that data to print out fake shipping paperwork and again, literally just go and pick up shipments that are not their own. Now, the interesting thing is, as dramatic as all this sounds, in their annual analysis, CargoNet observed that these theft by deception schemes drew a lot of news coverage and media attention, but truthfully, traditional cargo theft is still the most common kind. Although penalties clearly are not a deterrent, they have at least in some ways kept pace with technology. For instance, if what is stolen is worth at least $5,000, which most of it is, if it's taken across state or international borders, or, this is notable, if the crime involves the internet in any way, then it becomes a federal offense with all of the stiffer penalties that go along with that. And because with all of this digital intervention, cargo theft can now be directed from overseas, making it harder to detect in time to stop, having those kinds of tie-ins to the internet is that much more important. Now, the federal government plays a role in this too, predominantly through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMSCA. They're part of the Department of Transportation. With some of these more sophisticated crimes, like the strategic cargo theft, the fictitious pickups, the real issue is shippers can't tell the difference between real and fake carriers. How do they know a carrier that is standing right in front of them is legitimate and authorized to pick up a load, or just somebody holding very convincing paperwork with a big empty truck behind them to steal your stuff in? Now, that's what MC numbers or motor carrier numbers are supposed to be for. These are unique identifiers, carrier by carrier, that you've probably seen if you've ever been on the highway and had the cab of a truck driving down next to you. It's usually right on the driver's door. Those numbers are being stolen and used to mislead shippers into literally handing over their cargo. Scott Cornell, who's the national practice lead for transportation for Travelers Insurance, told Transport Topics that organized cargo theft groups were purchasing MC numbers by the hundreds. But that was then. It's become so lucrative, they are now purchasing them by the thousands. And what makes it possible for them to do this? Horribly out-of-date technology. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration databases are used to verify company legitimacy. In 2022, the FMCSA received over 88,000 complaints about potential fraud. That's according to the Transportation Intermediaries Association. But from what I read, they're not even doing a good job collecting complaints. They have a specific database for complaining, the National Consumer Complaint Database. It's designed to collect reports on bad actors, but it has been criticized for being clunky, outdated, and ineffective. Ann Reinke, president and CEO of the Intermodal Association of North America, says that the FMCSA systems, both for checking MC numbers and also for submitting complaints, have become completely antiquated. Bob Costello, chief economist with the American Trucking Association, agrees, saying, quote, "They're tricking fleets, shippers, brokers, and we're delivering inadvertently the freight right to the criminals. But don't worry, we're from the government and we're here to help." On May 21st, the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation voted unanimously to advance the Household Goods Shipping Consumer Protection Act. This bill would, quote, "clarify the authority of the administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration relating to the shipping of household goods." It would restore the agency's ability to issue civil penalties against these bad actors. In plain English, the legislation would require brokers, freight forwarders, and carriers to provide a valid business address to the FMCSA before acquiring operating authority. Now, hold on. So, brokers, freight forwarders, and carriers don't currently have to provide a valid business address before getting permission to operate? Are you serious? This absolutely blows my mind. We know that the databases are in bad shape. And let's be honest, that's true of all of us. The private sector is currently obsessed with data quality. None of the investments we want to make in AI or automation are going to pay off if we can't clean up our data. Feels like that should get some attention here too. These criminals are willing to play a long game. Some of them are taking long enough to actually establish their own credibility before they burn it. They buy those thousands of MC numbers and then operate legitimately for a year or two just to establish credibility. Then they go in for the kill when the timing and the opportunity are right. Will Johnson, the chief special agent of the BNSF Railway Police Department, testified before the Senate Commerce Committee's Surface Transportation Subcommittee back in February. He suggested modernizing FMCSA's vetting process to, quote, "include stronger authentication methods, real-time carrier verification, and implement controls around the sale or transfer of DOT and MC numbers." He also wants to increase the penalties associated with cargo theft. And again, going back to the start of this, maybe just ask for an address and validate it. Now, FreightWaves recently shared a list of 50 high-value and violent criminal incidents that took place in the trucking industry over the last year. Here are a few that tie directly to what I've been talking about. There was a series of organized crime cargo thefts in Glendale, California, that resulted in the loss of over $200 million. These thieves targeted high-value shipments like electronics and copper from distribution centers, using double brokering and identity theft. Of the problem here is that Glendale is so close to Los Angeles, where strategic cargo theft was up by 430% in 2024. In Dallas, Texas, there was a relay-style hijacking that got away with $180,000 in ill-gotten gains. They used hacked GPS data to steal copper from a rest stop, and they transferred it from the legitimate truck to their own truck in less than 30 minutes. Now, copper is a really interesting case example, and it showed up in both of those stories from FreightWaves. When we sort cargo theft by category, according to data from DC Velocity, the most dramatic increase in cargo theft was metals. They nearly doubled with a 96% year-over-year surge and 53 incidents. It comes as no coincidence that this growth coincides with record high copper prices, suggesting that organized crime groups are as smart as they are sneaky. Copper that's intended for automotive manufacturing and construction is stolen from trucks en route all the time. Last year, there was a 26% increase in copper theft in the US and Canada alone, almost 4,000 incidents. And this is another problem that's bad and getting worse fast. The first half of 2025 is up 61% in terms of copper theft when we compare it to the first half of 2024. And unfortunately, copper is practically untrackable. These thieves are targeting load boards where freight middlemen match the loads with trucks. They know what origins, what destinations, and what origin-destination pairs are most likely to include copper. Then they do whatever their fraudulent approach is and simply pick up the load like they're the legitimate truck. The US Department of Energy estimates that copper theft costs US businesses around $1 billion a year. An estimated 8% of copper wiring for new construction is lost to either outright theft or that's skimming off the top. That adds up to 15.7 million pounds of copper a year. And that is enough to wire 112,000 homes. Now, I've talked about how thieves are using tech to score. So, how are supply chains fighting back? Well, there's an interesting new story coming out of Texas, a company called Overhaul. They're a supply chain tech firm that recently raised $105 million in Series C funding. Most simply, they track shipments in real time, not necessarily revolutionary, but there's a little bit more to it. They're monitoring shipments and equipment closely enough so that if a truck door opens unexpectedly or a driver suddenly goes the wrong way, they are instantly on top of it. They both recover stolen loads and try to prevent the theft from taking place from the very beginning. Now, that's all wonderful, but here's the problem with that. There is still only so much money available to be invested in supply chains. So the scale of this problem is requiring companies to decide between cargo theft prevention and supply chain mapping or control towers, different types of strategic investment that would allow them to grow their business, not just protect the things that they're carrying. As I said in my open, there are a lot of costly problems facing the supply chain today. This is just one on the list. But you do have to wonder, if cargo theft keeps growing the way it has been, it could easily rise to the top of the list and become public enemy number one before the end of the year. Maybe then this problem will finally get the attention it deserves.